What is the meaning of allied? Anybody?
The joined or joined.
Something that is in alliance. See, allied, like in the First World War, Second World War, they were allies. So they came together so that they can support each other. That is called allied. So in studies also, see, though every subject are having their own nature, they are different than each other. Like we have discussed yesterday, when we study poetry, we get a different kind of psychological feeling. When we study history, we get a different kind of psychological feeling. So even though those things are there, but nevertheless, subjects are allied to each other. Subjects are interconnected to each other, and there is, for example, the study of political science will be helpful in understanding history, and having a perception of history will be able to will assist the understanding of political sciences. That, of course, in detail we will be discussing later on. But here, please remember that allied is definitely, the subjects, they are supporting each other. They are bettering our understanding of another subject. Similarly, there are auxiliary sciences. Now, what is the meaning of auxiliary? What is the meaning of auxiliary? Have you heard the word earlier?
Supplementary.
Supplementary. Very right. Anything that supplements, for example, we have auxiliary units. So if there is an industry which manufactures car, so that car manufacturing company may not be investing money in manufacturing tires. So tire they might be procuring from an industry which is nearby. So that tire producing industry has become a kind of auxiliary to the main car manufacturing industry. It supports that, so that the work of the car manufacturer becomes relatively easier. So there are certain sciences, there are certain subjects which have this kind of, which play this kind of auxiliary role. They support our understanding of history. For example, I want to study history, but I may not be expert in coins, understanding coins. So in that case, what I have to do is I have to take the help of somebody who knows more about coin. And numismatic, that is a study of coins, has become a kind of auxiliary science. Similarly, I may not understand the old writing. For example, Maratha correspondence used to be written in Modi. So I have to take the, if I don't know Modi, if I am not able to read it, not everybody could. I have to take the help of somebody who is expert in that Modi. So he is an expert in understanding the script. So he became a kind of epigraphist, who can a linguistic expert, who can understand the old language. Epigraphy is something that is written in the old language, in the inscriptions. Well, so, in a nutshell, these two sciences, that is allied and auxiliary sciences, they better our understanding. They help us in understanding the history in a better manner. Now, what is the difference between allied and auxiliary sciences? The first thing is that allied sciences are those sciences who not only support history, but they have developed their own independent branch of studies also. They have their own independent branch of studies as well. For example, history and economics, they are mutually supportive, and economics by itself is an independent branch of study. Psychology by itself is an independent branch of study. But there are certain sciences which remain auxiliary in nature. For example, numismatic, the study of coins, by itself will not be that much important topic until unless it gives us input where we can understand the past in a better manner. So here I'll share with you. Well, is PPT and me, both of us, both are visible to you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this allied, yeah, okay. So this allied and auxiliary sciences, They support our understanding of history. Allied, apart from supporting history, also have an independent branch and auxiliary sciences. They mainly play and our they mainly play supportive role in understanding history. Now let us go next and try to understand what role these some of the allied sciences they play in our understanding of history. Well, okay. Now let us start with economics. Tell me which way economics is in a way allied to history, which way the understanding of economics will improve our understanding of history. Can you tell me? Yes, you can also write in the chat box when somebody is speaking. I can read that. Yeah, tell me anything that comes to your mind. Which way economics and history are interconnected? How they support each other? How economics support the understanding of history, and in a way, the understanding of history will support the understanding of economics. Yes. How many of you had economics during graduation? Anybody? Yes. Nobody. Well, okay. See, economics. What is economics? Economics tells us that our wants, that is our desires, our needs are unlimited, but our sources are limited. And managing these two things is a economics. That is, managing the unlimited source, unlimited desire with the limited sources is called economics. So this understanding gives us a better perception of history that the wars are fought because there is a scarcity of resources. Otherwise, nobody will risk their life, because in the war, it's not that you are always victorious. Sometimes you may lose and you may even be killed. But people do fight wars. People do invade another country, taking a huge risk of losing their own life because they want more and more resources. So this resource management is an idea that is sharpened by the study or but with understanding of economics, and that understanding helps us to understand and unfold and decipher many events in history. Like example I gave, why did it is the people from Afghanistan and Central Asia, they generally invaded India, and we rarely find an example, very few, when the Indian people have gone and invaded Afghanistan and Central Asia. Can you tell me the reason why it is so? Can you recollect? Yes, yes. Please speak, speak or write or type. I like the class to be a bit interactive. Yes, I can see something in the chat. We will know about the trade related matters. Yeah, Shahili, yeah, that is true. Well, okay. See, another the important thing about this the example, the question I ask is that India is having a lot of fertile land, and once you come invade from Afghanistan, you immediately land in Punjab, which is one of the most fertile plain in India, and that is the reason people risk their life. Then if you further able to come inside the Indian territory, cross Delhi, you have Ganga and Yamuna Doab. That is another fertile area that is present day UP and Bihar and Bengal. So that fertile land which supported the economy, which became a bedrock on which the economic activities develop. Agriculture is generally considered as a bedrock of the economic activity. That is the reason if during at least during the ancient and medieval period, the agriculturally prosperous countries, people fought for that, because that agriculturally prosperous land can later on support the huge army, and then that is how the economics influences the course of history. And Karl Marx will be studying about classical Marxism later on, probably in the I think in the this semester only last unit. Marx says that behind every human action, the reason is economic. People, well, that is a bit far fetched. I have my own disagreement. people have now rejected this Marxism uh, unfailing theory as an absolute truth. There are certain complications behind all our action. There is not only a economic motive. One action can be influenced by the numerous motive. For example, teacher teaches, he does earn his salary, but it is quite possible that some of the teachers might be really inspired by teaching, and they feel that they should be doing a noble job, so on and so forth. It's not only for money, but nevertheless, the money is a very important factor that shapes our attitude, that shapes our actions, and that is what the history tells us, that it is the economic motive which was a prime mover, which was one of the important factor that has given shape to history. Similarly, at the same time, little bit perception of history will also sharpen your understanding of economics. For example, how the agriculture has developed, and how that agriculture has led to the settlement of the villages. Because before agriculture, a man used to be kind of wanderer, and he used to go around to gather his food from the forest in hunting. And in that stage, generally he led a nomadic life, because there was hardly any surplus. But with the discovery of agriculture, people started leading a settled life, and there was a kind of surplus. You are able to, you are in a position to produce more food than that is required. So you have a leisure time, and that is how the civilization has came into existence. People started thinking about how they can improve their life. So the discovery of agriculture and the surplus, they are actually economic activities, but they have significantly influenced the course of history. Settlements, generally we find that settlements are generally in those areas where the land is fertile, where there is abundance of water, and especially civilization in ancient time has came into existence on the banks of the river, because the river, it supported the economic activities. Is it clear to you guys, the connection between economics and how the understanding and tools of economics can give us a better perception of history? Is it clear? Is there any doubt about this? Yes. Otherwise, we can go ahead and take up the next line. Sorry.
Yes, it is clear.
Is clear? Okay, fine. Okay, so now the next, we will discuss political science first, and sociology later, and literature we will take up later on, because it's a bit of different category. Seeley, one of the important historian, writes that today's politics is tomorrow's history, and tomorrow's history is today's politics, of course, or yesterday's politics is today's history, and today's politics will be tomorrow's history. Understanding of political science, how the parliament has came into existence, what were the advantages and disadvantages of democracy, why there were mostly monarchical form of government in ancient time, and why the small democracies like the democracies in Greece, and there were some democratic pockets in India, they did not survive very long, and they were finally conquered by the monarchical form of government. So this understanding of the nature of democracy, understanding the nature of the monarchy, it comes within the jurisdiction of political science. But having that understanding of the nature of parliamentary system, democracy, or the monarchical form of government will give us a better understanding. For example, in ancient time, most of you will be studying this one paper stating ancient and medieval India in the third semester. And when you study that ancient Indian monarchical system or ancient Indian politics, you will understand that surprisingly, these democracies were conquered by the monarchy, because democracy, they had a kind of discussion or argumentative hall where the people used to come together and they discuss, and they used to take they used to decide what course of action should be taken, whether we should fight a war or whether we should go for peace. So in that discussion, it was very difficult to reach to some conclusion, and but the monarchical form of government, as the power was concentrated in the hands of king and his supporters, few people, they were in a position to take the decision very quickly, as well as they were in a position to enforce it. Anybody who opposed the will of the king is severely punished, and that is the reason they were in a position to marshal the very strong army and finally conquer the democracies. So democracy, though in a modern day is a best possible institute, it have many advantages over the monarchy, but it took a lot of time for the people to come to that level and accept the democratic form of government. And even still in 21st century, there are certain countries which are still ruled by the hereditary monarch. There is no democracy. So why this is happening? Why the democracy is successful in particular country and it is not so successful in another country? We have, for example, take the example of our neighboring country, Pakistan. There, after though we both the countries, it was India together, but we achieved independence almost at the same time, 1947. Just one day before, Pakistan has achieved one day before. But if you study the history of survival of the democracy, in India, in Pakistan, we find that in Pakistan there had been a coup. The military general were removing the elected representative and then becoming the supreme ruler. So this democracy and dictatorialship and the monarchy. These are the terminology. These are the institutions which are in detail studied by political scientists. But being a student of history, if we have a little bit perception of how the monarchy function, how the dictatorial system of government function, how the democracy functions, we can have a better perception of history. For example, the question that I raised now can be an interesting area of research. Why democracy has remained by and large successful in India? It's still not perfect. There is still an exploitation of the poor people, and rich people enjoy a lot of privileges. But nevertheless, it has survived here. But why there had been a repeated coup in Pakistan? What is the reason that America is a very vibrant democracy and very strong country, and in contrast, during the Cold War period, there was a kind of dictatorialship that emerged in the communist Russia in USSR. So, what were the relative strength and relative weaknesses of these two kind of system? It is a in detail. It is a political scientist who knows about it. But if you are doing this kind of research, you need to have an understanding of the functioning of the democracy. You just can't go and start probing the area, start probing why there had been a repeated coup and repeated coming of the dictatorial form of government in Pakistan. Why under the dictatorial form of government of Stalin, Russia, USSR had made a rapid progress, but there had been a lot of human right violation. And why America, as a very strong, vibrant democracy, has made a lot of progress. These are the very complex issues. But now the Cold War is history now. 1991 USSR has broken into pieces. But if you want to study that history, the history of the progress and the history of the Cold War and the conflict between these two power blocks, one led by USSR and one led by USA, you need to have an understanding of the political institutions. So in that way, the political science, the knowledge about the political institution is will become a sharp, will become a tools which will make your research of history, which will make your understanding of history sharper and sharper. Is this topic clear to you guys? Political science and history? Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Any doubt you have so far? Anything that comes to your mind about political science and history, or even the subject that we have covered before that, that is economics and history? Okay. Okay, Maria. Well, fine. So political science is clear now. Now let us take up next, that is sociology. Now, what is sociology? Have anyone of you have studied sociology during their graduation? Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Very good. Tell me, what is sociology?
It is the study of society and the social institutions.
Yeah. Very right. See, in general, how the social institutions function, how the society is present today, that generally comes within the purview of sociology. But the society, it cannot come into existence in a vacuum. It does need a certain kind of political atmosphere, certain kind of cultural atmosphere, certain kind of religious, and all the dimensions of human life. They influence the social makeup. And generally speaking, sociology, the main focus of sociology is on present, how the society functions today. But in order to understand the functioning of the society today, we may have to go considerably into the past. For example, caste system is still pertinent today. But if you want to understand the proper functioning of the caste system today, you may have to go considerably into the past and try to understand how the caste system has evolved initially. Why the caste system, in spite of so much of protest against this, in spite of the writing of so many social reformer against the injustice in the caste system, why the caste system is surviving. And in order to understand these questions, you need to take the help of sociology. Or if there is a person of sociology, he may have to take the help of history, because present emerges from the past. And that is what is called sociology. There is a very interesting term called social determinism. What is the meaning of social determinism? Dakshana, have you studied this term in sociology?
So I don't remember.
Well, okay. For example, see, you all are ladies, and you don't feel any hesitation in coming to the university. Because of lockdown, nobody is coming. But nevertheless, if the condition had been normal, you don't feel any hesitation in coming to the university. Neither your parents feel any hesitation to come to the university. But just imagine that if you had been born, let us say 50, 60 years back, probably many of you would have not got a chance to come to university. Probably your parents won't allow you, because the social attitude, social thinking of that time was different, and that is the reason it determines your thinking. It determines your personality. We are, to the greater extent, a result of the social determinism. That means the society decides how Dr. Khangai should be. For example, society decides how a particular person should behave. For example, just imagine a situation. You see on one day Dr. Khangai standing on a panthela in a square and smoking a cigarette openly. Tell me how you feel about it. And wearing a very red tight fitting t-shirt and wearing a tight fitting jeans. How you feel about it? Tell me. Will you not be surprised?
Yes, sir.
You will be surprised, because society has determined how a professor should be, and that kind of behavior is not acceptable for a professor. So I mean, I don't have that kind of inclination. I never spoke in my life, but just imagine that even if I feel like doing that, I'm not in a position to do that, because so society has determined how Dr. Khange should be behaving. Are you getting my point, guys?
Yes, sir.
So, when you study sociology, you understand all these factors. There had been a historical character who were the prisoner of their own time. So, even if they wanted to do certain things, they were not able to do this. For example, I have done the research on Bhakti movement, and in that, I have studied Ganeshwari, the commentary on Bhagavad Gita written by Ganeshwara, and there I can very clearly find that conflict in his mind. Being a very liberal person, he wanted that everybody should be treated equally, but at certain places he showers a very high praise on the Brahmin and treats Shudra as a kind of inferior. So his mind was also a result of the social determinism. In our mind there is always a lot of conflict. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Mostly we go through a lot of conflict, because we feel that why this I need to do that, and but the society forces you. For example, in case of in India, people are very particular. They take a lot of interest in your family. So even if you are 30, 30, 32, 33, and if you are not getting married, people will start asking you a lot of questions. Why are you not getting married? And more with the girls. If the girl is not married by the age of 30 or 27, 20, or 26, 25, whatever it is, little bit of here and there. In the remote area, it is even 20, 21 is too much. people will start asking question to their parents, why are you not marrying of your daughters? So the society determines at what age the girl should be getting married. Even if the girl may not be interested, she might want to pursue her career, or she might want to stay alone. That is her choice. But generally, there will be a lot of social pressure which will determine your behavior, and this behavior of human being, individually or collectively, makes history. See, yes or no? It is a behavior of the people in the past, that we generally have an account in history, and this behavior is generally determined by the social determinism. That is the laws given by the society, and in order to have a proper understanding of history, we need to be familiar with this different terminology, different understanding, and different tools of sociology. For example, social determinism is one of the tools that I have told you. So in that way, sociology and history are interconnected. It will sharpen your understanding of history. It will give you a lot of tools where you can do better research in history. Is this point clear to you guys? Sociology and history? Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Now let us come to literature. This is very understanding. This is very interesting. Can you recollect which way literature seems to be in a way connected to history, or literature seems to be in a way supporting the our understanding of history, and vice versa? Yes. Yes. Well, okay. Is it a too tough question? Is it too much becoming? Is it too much, guys, for you? बहुत ज्यादा हो रहा है क्या आपको? हेवी हेवी टॉपिक हो गया क्या? यस.
No, sir.
अच्छा. ओके. 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 चलिए, कोई कुछ नहीं आ रहा है, कुछ नहीं क्लिक कर रहा है आपको कि लिटरेचर और हिस्ट्री कहाँ का इंटरकनेक्टेड है, वेयर दे आर इंटरकनेक्टेड?
So the old written text can help, like literature means like all the written records.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, okay, okay, okay. Technically, you are right, but literature is generally creative writing. That is a term we use for literature, English literature and Marathi literature. In fact, technically speaking, all the writing are literature, but in generally speaking, it is a creative writing. So how they are interconnected to history. First, very important thing is that historical character and the historical events, they provide lot of source material for literary recreation. For example, Shivaji, Aurangzeb, or the Battle of Panipat. Those were the historical events or historical characters, and they have provided lot of material for the people to reconstruct those events as per their imagination and provide literature. Literature is something that gives you an aesthetic pleasure, that triggers your emotion. For example, like yesterday we already had a discussion that many of us cry while reading literature. So literature have that capacity to touch your heart, to generate certain emotion in you, and lot of source material for this literature has been drawn from history. There are a number of novels which is written on Shivaji. There are a number of novels which is written on Peshwas. That is a gift that is coming from history literature. But how the reading of literature also sharpens our understanding of history. For example, I will tell you what Shivaji really thought. It is difficult for us to understand. For example, in historical texts, what we have is that what Shivaji has actually done, what he has actually spoken, and what actually he has dictated to his writer. That we know. But do the man dictate and speak everything that comes to his mind? Probably not. There are a lot of things that comes to your mind which we generally don't speak, or which we generally don't write, or which we generally don't put into practice. But how to take peep into the minds of the historical character, historical character के मन में क्या चल रहा है, इसको अगर हम समझने की कोशिश करते हैं तो वहां पर लिटरेचर बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट रोल प्ले करता है. बिकॉज लिटरेरी पर्सन, a poet, a writer, they they have that imaginative power where they will put 2 plus 2 together certain behavior characteristic of that person. They will try to put it together, and then they will reconstruct the whole story. And by reading all that story, it might be an imaginative. All of that may not be right, but it will still give you peep into the minds of the historical character. It will still give you peep into the kind of historical event. For example, Panipat, the third battle of Panipat, 1761, where Marathas were defeated by Ahmad Shah Abdali. That is an event which had stirred the consciousness, and on Panipat we find number of right. The Peshwas on we find number of writing literary creation. Shivaji, who is like a hero to the Marathi people, we find number of novels created on the life of Shivaji, and all these novels, all this literature, try to give us a deeper understanding of what was going on in the minds of the different characters who played an important role in those historical events. Uh, this peep in the minds of the character is generally very difficult. We have to just imagine. For example, from my behavior, the way I talk to you, or the way I take my class, or even the way I dress up, you may just imagine what Dr. Khangai's personality is, what Dr. Khangai generally think he might be. Sometimes you might be you might be not precisely, but you by my behavior, by my the way I speak to you, you can have a kind of understanding of my psychological makeup may come very closer to you. But if you have a better imagination, like a writer, your perception of my psychic personality will be closer to my thought, and that is where the literature plays a very important role. Being a normal person, being a student of history, we may not come very closer to the psyche of the historical character, but being an imaginative, having a sharper imagination, having a deep insight into the character, in the mindset of the person, the literary person can recreate the historical character in such a manner that you will begin to understand what Shivaji has thought and what Bajirao Peshwa has thought, and what really went on in the minds of Bajirao Peshwa when he fell in love with Mastani. In the historical record, you may not find a lot of reference to Mastani because she was generally not liked by Peshwa's family. She was a Muslim lady, and Bajirao Peshwa being a Brahmin, this Brahmin family, they always discriminated against this Mastani lady. But during that time, when the caste system was having lot of influence on the people during that time, what went on in the minds of Bajirao, that in spite of opposition to his family, in spite of opposition to the lot of Brahmins, and in spite of opposition to his court, he went on loving Mastani, and even bring her to the Shaniwar Wada, the palace that he built at that today. This you will be studying in the fourth semester Maratha history, but you won't find a lot of information in the historical chronicle. So what the literary person will do is that he will collect whatever the information he have, and then he will try to fill that gap, and then he will reconstruct the whole character of Mastani and Bajirao, and their love episode. And this form a very very interesting episode. Recently, I read a novel titled Rao in Marathi that was on Bajirao and Mastani, and that is a very interesting reconstruction. The writer has little bit deviated at some places from the historical evidences, but nevertheless, that will give you that will give you an understanding of the psychological struggle that Bajirao must have gone through, because he has done something which his family don't approve. You all are young, and probably you understand the conflict that you might be, or we all of us probably go through when you are young, and if you fall in love with a person that your family don't approve, and there is nowhere you can keep a record of it, what really goes on in your mind. But reading of this kind of literature will give us a peep, and that will also sharpen your emotion, that will sharpen your personality. Emotional personality is also very important dimension of human life. Well, did you understand, guys, literature and history, how they are interconnected? Very important thing is that literature have a capacity to give you a peep in the minds of the historical character. Is that fine? Yes.
Yes, sir.
Well, okay, fine. Now, as I have told you, there cannot be very watertight compartmentalization between allied sciences and auxiliary sciences. There are certain subjects which are sometimes mentioned as allied sciences and sometimes mentioned as auxiliary sciences. So don't have very rigid compartmentalization. We will be going to the next slide. These are further different sciences which are allied sciences of history, like medical science, psychology, philosophy, and geography. And let us start with geography now. Tell me how geography affects history. How the understanding of geography will sharpen your understanding of history. Yes. Probably I gave certain examples already when during my elementary classes.
The Himalaya examples that you gave in the last class.
Yeah, very right. Himalaya is one of the important geographical feature, and that has profoundly affected the course of Indian history. Till 1962, there was no invasion from China side because that is a very huge mountain wall, and it's very difficult to cross. So Himalaya has kept us safe. Definitely affected history. The ranges towards northwestern side are a little bit lower, having certain passes. So we find most of the invaders are coming from that side. And the reason, the examples that I gave while discussing history and economics, for example, the rivers and the fertility of land, these are the part of geographical features, and these geographical features have influenced history. For example, we see that most of the civilization are coming into existence on the banks of the river. Second thing is that in case of India, we find that the growth of civilization is from the northwest towards northeast, because northwest, that is present day Pakistan and Sindh, where the Indus Valley has came into existence. Sindhu Valley, Sindhu Sabhyata, British they pronounce it as the Indus Valley. So I am a bit uncomfortable with that colonial hangover, but in any case, we just can't rub it off immediately. So those region are comparatively arid region where we don't get a lot of rainfall, and subsequently what happen is, if there is a less rainfall, the vegetation, the trees, those trees will not be very strong trees, and there will be very less forest cover, so it will be relatively easier to cut it and make the land available for agriculture. So that area, the Indus Valley, that has developed a civilization first, but then later on, because of the huge cutting of the trees, we find that there came the drought. There was scarcity of rain, and the river dried up, and the civilization itself has became extinct. So you see the geography playing a very important role here. Existence of the less rainfall, availability of the land, then cutting of the trees, and the drying up of river. Then as the people have developed stronger and stronger tools to cut the tree, like iron was discovered, we find that people are slowly migrating from the Sindhu Valley to present day Punjab, that is area of Sapta Sindhu, and then later on to the Ganga Yamuna Doab, because now they are having a sharper axe made up of iron, so they can cut the trees and make the land available for the agriculture. Similarly, in case of geography, like I probably also gave you example of Marathas. Marathas, they made a very effective of the mountainous region of Maharashtra territory in the western Maharashtra, and they could effectively check the invasion of the Mughal and Adil Shah before that. So geography played a very important role. In case of let us say South Indian history, we find that this Coromandel coast, that is eastern coast of the Arabian Sea, you can Google it and see Coromandel coast on the map. This Coromandel coast had been always conflict, had been a bone of contention between Vijayanagara and Bahamani Sultanate, because for the simple reason that that is a very fertile area. Most of the rivers of southern India, they emerge in the west, travels towards east, and merge in the Bay of Bengal. And when they merge in the Bay of Bengal, they form delta. Delta rivers, they form delta before merging into the sea, and this delta is very fertile area. And for that fertile area, this Deccani
Yes, sir,
Sultanate,
we know that.
huh? Delta, well, very right. So for this delta, for this
Yes,
fertile,
sir.
yeah, very good, for this fertile land, there had been a lot of war. So you see this geography, river, a mountain, and delta. These are the geographical feature. But this geographical feature had affected the course of history. It led to the lot of war between Vijayanagar and Bahamani. Are you understanding this, guys? Geography and history. Well,
Yes, sir.
similarly,
Yes, sir.
well, very good. Similarly, you see that Panipat had been a very important battlefield. Who will be ruling over Delhi was generally decided at the Battle of Panipat. There are three important battles in Indian history which decided that who will be the king of Delhi. Now, what is the reason? There is a peculiar geographical location of Panipat because somebody who is invading India from the northwest, if he has established himself in Punjab and then if he wants to come to Delhi, he has to cross Panipat because if he is coming from Punjab, on the northern side of Panipat there is a mountain and those mountains are usually snow covered, and over the mountain you cannot march your army. You have your elephants and camels and horses, and it's very difficult to climb the mountain and get down. And then south of Panipat there is a desert of Rajasthan, so it's difficult to march through desert where it is difficult to get food and fodder and water for you, for the man and animal. So what is left is there a narrow strip that connects Punjab and the Ganga Yamuna Doab, and that on that narrow strip there is a town of Panipat. So anybody who is invading India after conquering Punjab, if he has to come to Delhi, he is left with no option but to come via Panipat. And from the Indian side, the Indian king at Delhi, he always thought that if a person is crossing that narrow strip, he will be coming very close to my capital, Delhi, and it's better I'll try to check him at Panipat. And that is the reason the person invader coming through Panipat became inevitable for him. He has to march his army through that narrow strip, which is plain. And Indian king had tried to check him in that narrow strip, and usually both the armies met at Panipat. And you see this peculiar geographical feature of Panipat, having a mountain on the one side and the desert and river on the other side, has made it an important battleground because that is the only plain. It sits on the plain strip that connects Punjab and Ganga Yamuna Doab. Is it clear to you guys? Geography and history connection? Yes.
Yes, sir.
Well, okay, fine. Now we'll take up the next. Uh, Let us take psychology first, because while discussing literature, I have already touched upon psychology. Any change that comes in the human life, any material change that you can see, obviously, it first takes place in the mind of the man. For example, a sculpture, when he creates a beautiful sculpture from the stone, he first imagines that thing in his mind. And in order to understand history, which is a record of the event that you can see, material achievement, it is good that we should understand the psychology behind that. Because if you understand the psychology, you will have a better perception. Why it is happening that Afghan and Turk, they came and invaded India, but Indian people rarely went and invaded Afghanistan and Turk. There is a peculiar psychological makeup of that people, that the land was not fertile. Under the influence of Islam, this Afghan and Turk, they converted to Islam, and then they thought that it is their religious duty to spread Islam all over the world. So let us invade those areas where Islam is not existence. One of the reason, of course, not the complete reason. But this desire for the fertile land, as well as desire to spread their religion, created a peculiar psyche of invader. And in contrast, the people who were staying in a very fertile area where nature has given them a lot, has developed a psychology of peace and renunciation like Buddha has done. We don't find renouncers, very few Sufis are there, but renunciation, that is giving up the material life, is a kind of idea that comes into the mind of the people who had experienced pleasures of life and realized that the pleasure are not giving you any enduring happiness. So this psychology develops into the particular area, and this psychological makeup of individual as well as the people of that region had given shape to history. For example, if you take the history of India, you will always find that whenever the central king has become weak, the outsider territory they revolted and then they became independent. So there had been always centrifugal tendencies in India where people or the king they tried to separate and remain independent. But in contrast, if you study history of England, see, England is such a far away place and they have sent East India Company here for doing business thousands of miles away. And this East India Company, taking advantage of the political situation in India, became master of India. But though these Britishers who came in small number from England, though they were thousands of miles away, there is not a single case of revolt against the Queen because psychologically they were integrated as a British man, which was not a case in India during the medieval period. So understanding this psychology, the group psychology is very, very important. Is that clear to you guys?
Yes,
So understanding of the psychology
sir.
gives you an understanding why the people of particular region behave in a particular manner. For example, if you are in northern India, let us say the city like Bareilly, it is you will not generally find that after 10 o'clock a lonely woman or lonely girl is walking on the street. But if you go to Gujarat and if you go to South India like Tamil Nadu, you will find that even 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock it's very normal for a lonely lady to walk around. What has created this difference? Both are women. A woman at Bareilly, let us say, or Allahabad, and a woman at, let us say, Coimbatore. Both are women, but a woman who is brought up in Bareilly and Allahabad, she knew since childhood that it is not safe. She is conditioned to fear that at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock, if she ventures out of the house, it's not safe for her. But a girl or a lady who is brought up in a place like Coimbatore, she will not have that much hesitation. And in case of requirement, she can go out. So, this psychology have a this psychology is a result of the peculiar social situation. And it's important for a student of history to understand why a particular kind of psychology is developed among a particular group. It is called group psychology. Why this has developed? Are you understanding the point, guys? Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So psychology is over here. Uh, then comes philosophy. See, philosophy. You must have heard the word. Can you define philosophy? What is philosophy? Yes. Yes. Well, generally, very higher thinking is considered as a philosophy. Knowledge is generally believed to have a different level. For example, there is a theoretical knowledge, there is an applied knowledge, and beyond that, there is a philosophical knowledge, which tells you that there is something that can be done in an innovative way, uh, which sharpens your perception, which alters your perception, the way you look at life. So that is generally called philosophy, and this philosophy has also influenced our the course of history. So having an understanding of philosophy will make you a better student of history. For example, see. Let us take the case of the case I have already mentioned. Islam believe in only one God, and that is the reason. Though the people who converted to Islam during the medieval period, even though they belong to the different races, like there were Arab, there were Persian, there were Turkish, there were Afghanis, but belief in only one God, Allah, it has united them. So their philosophy of life was to remain united under the banner of Islam and to spread Islam, and that has affected the course of history. In contrast, Hinduism believe in lot of diversity. It is not necessary that being a Hindu, I should worship one particular god. I can choose the god that I want to worship. Also, I can choose the way I want to practice Hinduism. It's quite possible that I may never go to temple, but I may read Bhagavad Gita in my house and call myself a Hindu. Even I may not do that. I will just, go my head to the portrait of a god, or may go to temple but never read Bhagavad Gita. Then also I can call myself a Hindu. So these two philosophies have fundamentally affected the psyche of the practitioner of these two religions, and we find them finally influencing the course of history. Not only the medieval period, even the modern period also. Like Barrister Jinnah, he said that Hindus and Muslims are like two banks of the river, and they will never meet, so they can never stay together. That is of course the perception of Barrister Jinnah. I don't subscribe to that. You human being have an intellect and can think out of box and can have capacity to rise above any kind of conditioning and find out the way where you can coexist peacefully. But nevertheless, if you take a look at history, this philosophy have definitely conditioned the mind of the people and influenced the course of history. It has contributed to the uniting the people across the races, and it has contributed making somebody who don't believe in your philosophy as your enemy, and you can attack them and kill them and convert them. So this is the philosophical thought which has influenced the course of history. For example, in bhakti movement, it has given a shape to Hinduism. The philosophy like ekam sat vipra bahuda varnati, there is only one god, but the learned call it by the different name, has influenced our thought, has influenced the course of history, has influenced our psychology. So we have covered these three, that is geography, philosophy, and psychology. Medical sciences we will take up in the next class, because I also have Marathi class at 11:35. I'll just stop sharing and let me just write down your name. Who are those came? Okay. We have Hina, then Mariam, then Takshana, then Gayatri, then Nirashe, then Rohan, then Sahili, then Shraddha. Sequence में और कोई छोटा तो नहीं। Okay, okay, friends. Thank you so much. This lecture, as usual, I will be putting on YouTube as well. And have a nice day. I am not sure about tomorrow's class so far. If I take tomorrow's class, I will let you know by today evening, right? In our group. Is that clear? Have you heard me?
Okay,
Yeah,
sir.
yeah, yeah. Mariam. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you then. Bye. Have a nice day.